another 20 bucks expensive. It's at $22 a tip. About $4.50. 22 American dollars per tip. No. 400 times anything. No, I didn't buy it. I stuck it in my Amazon. I'm plugging away. Well, they ain't up. I'm up 30%, 30%. What's the call for 25? Call for 25. What's the money make? You're out. You're out of it. You're in for a while. You made the right side. You used to do all about it. I got child care insurance, so I got something with it.
Diddy in court today.
Oh, I love it when you're on a job. But I got to feel Christmas. Yeah. Right now, pick one or the other. My wife's doing But you know, they can deny it.
You know how to do it? You should fire it. You'll see it's simply taking it out.
Yeah. No, really. But they deny this. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I didn't. Yeah, I mean, I got to use the first time. I thought the other way. I think in 3 months, he would have been like this. He's never getting it together. With him? What is he paying? That's some shop that we're over there. We did. They'll stop. It is. Yeah. You're like, listen, can I go in one, like 60 minutes? Now, that she's going to buy him out, she's going to be yes, what's up? Yep. What's going on, man? How you been, right? Hanging in there? How's business? Good, I see you. What's up, man? Busy with the baby stuff? How old now? 5 months. She's 6 right now.
Yeah, good luck. I thought you had a big one for my wife. How come you're not there?
I just started drinking coffee. My wife tries to help. She lets me sleep. She lets me not get up before the baby. Weekends.
Is she looking to stay home?
Probably stay home.
No one's here. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
that last couple of times.
Yeah, right.
No one even really knows him anymore when you have to like people that give the job
No, see, I had some holiday here too. Yeah. So they're like, since everyone else has to do virtual, you can do virtual. Yeah, so when you see me before noon, I'll be doing it. I'll use it. Well, that's what we were doing.
You sound like a defense attorney.
I'll find it.
That's why he's making me a hard. He was great. He might have been a little bill. That is
You don't stop. You don't stop. That whole thing is this way in. Halfway through it. Better luck next time. Knowing how bad he everything fun.
Yeah.
Again. I don't want
the public entrance over here to the side. Just around the left side there, there's public entrance.
You know what?
Don't know, but I'll go over here.
No. Guys. I'm done.
I'll go in now. Okay.
John. Taxi.
Listen to you.
Great fake. That was a great fake.
Nobody was even committed. Truthfully, I'm not arrested that person. That's why a lot of times we get the Oh, you got a black eye?
I will not ask him what happened because it's going to take 3 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't ask.
Yeah, that's how you get rid of those sports. Oh shit. Wait, I won't say. Yeah, no. But you won't say. I'm not saying no. No, but don't believe anything he says. No. I know one basic rules like what they say. That's why I left Your car doesn't even have a fucking legitimate excuse. I know. Isn't it amazing? Him and Bassett. Him and Bassett. You know how many, yes, he does. You know how many he dates Bassett this year? This week, 75. It was 72. But he think he may get spiked. 74. 74. But yet, 6 weeks in the ring, never family murders. Yeah. Right, don't say nothing.
What's the draw? The tax, the low taxes?
They're all talking in the chat, so we can start talking. They're like, how are we supposed to get that? They're all talking in Dallas. Technically, I can see offline. It's got to be on forever. Offline. Figure it out. They're going to say, what are your flight hours?
Yeah.
That's great.
How are you? No, he is. But it's funny.
don't do much work for Frank? That's the impression I got. Kevin doesn't do much work for you, but he does it on the 3-level. Right? I don't know. I don't know if you have it right now. What do you want to do? I know she's going to show up. Wait a minute. She's got to get sick. She's still on her. I guess if somebody can actually get sick in order to see the lead, she's not leading. He would have been here already.
Yeah, Bruce came in around 11. They were
everybody, I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome to our special live coverage here on Law and Crime of Sean Diddy Combs' hearing in federal court. This is a live look outside of that federal courthouse in Manhattan. So yes, the embattled rapper is back in court today for a pre-trial hearing in his criminal case. And again, few things to think about here. The parties are going to be discussing a few things, but really what they're going to be discussing, is our understanding, is the evidence that the government has turned over to the defense so far and will turn over to them. And although I should tell you, the government's investigation is ongoing. This is still a rapidly evolving pace. There is going to be more information that they put forward, but the prosecution is believed to be in track to complete productions of discovery thus far to the defense by the end of the month. Now, the question becomes is, will we believe that the stage is set for what to expect today? And I want to talk a little bit more about this to cover the updates in this case, what we can expect in that courtroom. Now, of course, there are no cameras in that courtroom, unfortunately. Having said that, we will be getting live updates about what is happening in real time. We will break it down for you. And also, our very own Elizabeth Milner is going to be in that courtroom as well. She will come out later to do a live hit for us to report about what she saw, what she heard. And also, here's the most important part. We are going to be taking your questions about this hearing, about this case overall. If you have a question, submit it on YouTube. We will break it down for you in real time. And I have a great panel of guests to also talk about it. But first, let's set the stage a little bit. What are we talking about? Taking a step back. As we know, Sean Diddy Combs has been held at the Metropolitan Detention Center since his arrest back in September. Now, I should say, it seems like Combs has really given up on any attempt to be released, given that the fact that his attorneys withdrew, he was having this appeal at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, withdrew that. And so he has lost his bail attempt at every stage. It doesn't appear he's going to be fighting that anymore. He will probably be within the Metropolitan Detention Center during the holidays, during New Year's. His trial is scheduled currently for May of 2025. And let's not forget what this is all about. Sean Combs was indicted on charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. And prosecutors allege that Diddy used his vast networking business, his empire, his wealth, his power, his resources to carry out alleged crimes, to carry out what the prosecution says were these coerced sexual performances with sex workers known as freak-offs. Now, going back to today's hearing, we are expecting a few things, I said. We're also expecting to learn more about the defense's position regarding the government's turning over Brady material, disclosing Brady material. Now, you and I both know what that is. That is potentially exculpatory evidence that could be helpful for the defense. What is the status of that? Also, just to give you a little quote here, Mark Agnifilo, who's Combs' lawyer, submitted a letter, wrote a letter to the judge where he was requesting, quote, the court modify the terms of the protective order that's in place. That's based on what everyone can say about this case, and to address the government's Brady disclosures thus far. So again, we want to get started with your questions and more. I want to bring on right now my special panel of guests. I am joined in-house here on studio by Law and Crime's legal counsel, Elizabeth Vulai, and we're also joined remotely by Safa Robinson-Frere, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor. Great to have you both here. Elizabeth, I'll start with you. What are you expecting in terms of the discussion regarding evidence being turned over? As we know, there are terabytes and terabytes of information in this case. What can we expect to hear?
Yeah, I think there's going to be discussion, obviously, of deadlines of the type of discovery that will be disclosed. You know, in the letter that the parties filed this week, we had the government say, you know, we expect to conclude all of our submission of discovery by December 31st, but they did also say they're still in the process of seizing certain evidence from electronic devices, mobile devices. So I think they will probably, maybe not a detailed breakdown of what they're going to be providing, but definitely timelines, what they expect to provide in the future, and you know, just generally getting everything ready for trial, which will be set in May.
Currently scheduled for May. Okay, we have an update about what's happening right now inside and outside of the courthouse. First update, Sean Combs' children have arrived at the courthouse. That's not a surprise. They have been supporting him and have been attending every one of his hearings during the beginning of this criminal case. Also, we have an update. The judge's clerk indicated we will bring out the defendant in a moment. Check with Mr. Agnifilo, again, Sean Combs' attorney. Okay, bring out the defendant. They are bringing out Sean Combs. He comes out of the side door in the MDC jail. He is wearing that tan outfit that we've seen before. I say we've seen. It's really been documented in courtroom sketches. There are no cameras in that courtroom. And he is sitting next to his attorney, Tony Rico, hugs him, then he waves at his other lawyers and those in attendance. Okay, Safo, as we wait for more updates, I had a question for you. So there was a letter that was submitted by both parties during in anticipation of this hearing, and it says the defense's position. The defense intends to file a letter with the court today requesting that the court modify the terms of the protective order to require the government to redesignate a small subset of discovery materials currently designated as inspection only to attorneys' possession only. We have met and conferred with the government on these materials, and discussions are at an impasse. What's going on there? What does that mean to designate it from inspection only to attorney's possession only?
Well, right now what we know is that there's a protective order that was issued by the judge, essentially saying that some items that are a part of discovery are either going to be withheld for the moment, or they're going to be only viewable through inspection. And what inspection essentially means is that defense counsel and the defendant will be able to go over to the prosecutor's office to inspect these items visually. They will not be able to take them in their possession. So what Mr. Combs' attorney is doing right now is he's making the request for it to be altered to say, Judge, we have inspected these things. We believe that these items that are subject to inspection would be more beneficial to us if we could have them in our possession, and we are making that request to have a certain amount of items that was initially required for inspection only to be given over to us in discovery in our full possession.
Okay, I appreciate you making that distinction because I think that's going to come up today. Okay, we have some questions from our watchers on YouTube. This is from Mystic Angel. At Law&Crime, how many charges is Diddy facing? He's facing 3 charges. He's facing a very widespread racketeering conspiracy charge, I should say. And again, that's kind of twofold. So a conspiracy is an agreement, a criminal agreement, and steps that are taken in furtherance of that agreement. And it's to violate the racketeering laws, that this was a criminal enterprise that was engaged in a number of illicit activities: sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping. So that's one charge. Then he's also facing sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion with respect to one victim. Then he's also facing transportation to engage in prostitution, which really ties to the idea of bringing sex workers in for the freak-off parties. But you and I both know, Elizabeth, that could change. He could be hit with a superseding indictment because there are reports that evidence is being presented to a grand jury. So those charges could amplify.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I think that was made clear in the initial indictment as well, is that, prosecution was still gathering up various forms of evidence. There's a lot of people involved here, a lot of potential evidence. So there's a possibility that just a first initial indictment is just a preview of what's to come.
We have another question from Zatara on YouTube. Is Diddy protected in jail? Based on the reports, there seems to be that he is within this specific unit, and it's not necessarily like he's getting private security, but there does seem to be a sense of protection. There does seem to be a sense of isolating him from others. And at one point, there was an avenue by which his attorneys were trying to get him out of the MDC, which, as we know, is plagued with violence. It's plagued with contraband. There are health issues in there. But ultimately, they abandoned that effort. And I believe the defense had said at one point that the MDC has been responsive to his needs. Safa, I want to go to you for another aspect. I'm going back to this letter that was submitted both by the prosecution and the defense. It says the defense's letter will also address the government's Brady disclosures thus far and argues that the Brady disclosures fail to meet the minimum constitutional standards to which Mr. Combs is entitled. So again, I mentioned what Brady is, again, this exculpatory information. What are they exactly saying? And in a case like this, with these charges, what could be exculpatory Brady material?
Well, what the defense is saying here is that there's an anticipation on their end that there are certain pieces of evidence or information that are considered Brady material. Again, to your point, exculpatory material. Sometimes as defense attorneys, we are aware that this information may exist and we wait for it to be turned over by the prosecutor. Now, it's up to the defense to determine what is Brady material and what is not, what is exculpatory and what is not. And it sounds to me like the defense is expecting that there's a certain key piece of evidence or certain key pieces of evidence that they will likely deem to be Brady material that have been failed to been provided thus far. So they're asking that the court intervene with respect to that. And Brady is an ongoing obligation. The Brady obligation under the United States versus Brady versus Maryland requires that at any point in the proceedings, whether it's now during the discovery period or even in the middle of trial, that Brady material, that exculpatory material be turned over to the defense attorneys at any point in time that it does exist.
We have a question from True Crime Fan for Life. I love that. So we know where this is dedication right now. We like this. Okay, are they going to bring charges for what they found in his jail cell? And let's just take a step back. There was evidence that is still a point of controversy that when there was this sweep at the MDC, photographs were taken of a number of his writings within his unit. And there was a whole back and forth about whether those were attorney-client privileged or work product privileged that wouldn't be allowed to be seen by the prosecution. Now, the prosecutors, at least within their bail argument that he should be denied bail, said there is evidence that he's been improperly contacting witnesses. And also, I should say, I'll just add to this, there was evidence that he was breaking the rules of the MDC by having three-way phone calls and using other inmates' PAC numbers to contact people that weren't on the pre-approved contact list. Do you think that they are building another case against him with additional charges like obstruction charges, or do you think it's just going to be additional evidence of the underlying racketeering case?
I was just going to say that. I think they'll use that to build into the racketeering charge. The racketeering charge is really unique in the sense that it's very broad in scope. You know, other charges such as sex trafficking or transportation to engage in prostitution have much more narrowly defined elements, but racketeering just points to this overall general criminal enterprise. So if you have evidence like what the prosecution is saying of him trying to contact third parties, intimidate witnesses, that helps to amplify that charge.
We have another update from court. Appreciate that, by the way, Elizabeth. So another update from court. Judge Subramanian. Good afternoon, Mr. Combs. Combs says, good afternoon. How are you doing today? Judge says, great. What can we take care of today? Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson says, we will produce all discovery by the end of this year. By the way, Safa, is that surprising that they're able to produce, I mean, all of the discovery? I know that in their letter they said there might be more discovery that comes in that they have to produce. This was an indictment in September. It's December now. We are talking about a ton of information. There's been a whole back and forth about what material can be viewed or when it can be viewed by Sean Combs on a laptop at the MDC. Are you surprised? It feels fast they're able to turn all this over, no?
It's been turned over pretty quickly, in my opinion. And you know what? Between the time that he was indicted, until this point in time, I think there's a pretty good track record for how far they've gotten in their discovery disclosures. Now, with respect to discovery, and there was a scheduling order, I believe, that was issued by the judge that also would have had a compliance date as to at what point the prosecution should have completed their disclosures. But discovery also is an ongoing process. I expect that there is voluminous discovery and a lot of information and material that was obtained by the U.S. Attorney's Office in this case. Again, recalling that there were, I believe, 3 raids on 3 separate properties with respect to Mr. Combs. And so all of that information has to be extracted. Those devices have to be extracted, cell phones, tablets, computers. All of those things are constantly being worked on. So although I expect it seems that they're going to be having turned over everything by the 31st, there could be other discovery that comes up later past December 31st that they will also have to continue to turn over.
Okay, we have another update from court. AUSA Johnson, prosecutor in this case, our investigation is ongoing. The judge says, can you tell me how you're complying with the Brady obligations, which we just spoke about? Prosecutor says, we are endeavoring to get them the information they are requesting, including interrogations we conducted. We've given files from victim 1, and you and I both know, Elizabeth, that there is strong evidence to suggest victim 1 is Cassandra Ventura. What do you make of that back and forth?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And the fact that they also want to be able to get access to the interrogations, I think, is key. One of the strong themes that we've seen by Combs's defense is that, you know, the way that the prosecution has been handling the case, the tactics that they've used. We saw an order that happened this week of the judge ruling that Combs's request for a motion and a hearing to helped determine that the video of him assaulting Cassandra Ventura was leaked by the government, which the judge denied. So I think there's a lot of focus on his defense team, on the tactics that have been played by the prosecution and how they've gone about prosecuting this.
But in terms of exculpatory material, I would suggest, right, they are still trying to put forward this narrative that she's not telling the truth about the relationship, right? The idea that, you know, if she's running away in that 2016 video, it's not evident she's running away from a freak-off, from sex trafficking, even though, you know, he's in his towel and allegedly beating her in a hotel hallway. But the idea of this is a domestic spat, I guess they're trying to find something in there that says if she really is their star witness, either A, she's not credible, or B, this is not evidence of racketeering or sex trafficking, right?
Yeah, I think that's a point that they've tried to hone in on many times. You know, earlier we saw before the video leaked and when she first filed her lawsuit in November of last year that, you know, they tried to frame it as this is a toxic, ongoing 10-year relationship with ups and downs. Obviously, when that video came out, it painted a very different picture. So I think a continuous tactic that we see by his team is trying to point that, as you said, her running away is not necessarily evidence of her running away from a potential sex trafficking situation, but possibly them engaging in consensual acts and then she's therefore leaving. That's what I think his team is trying to hone in on.
We are getting some great questions right now, so I want to combine two of them. And Saf, I'm going to go to you. This is a question from Jet. All we have heard about is Cassandra. Where's the others? Where are the other co-conspirators? Where's the superseding indictment? And let me couple that with another question from Irina Dmitrieva. What is the deadline to bringing a superseding indictment?
Yeah, so those co-conspirators and those older victims, we don't know where they are as of yet. Right now, it seems that they're in the grand jury proceedings and process, and so those proceedings are done in secret. We don't know who's there. We don't know who's testifying. It very well could be additional victims who will ultimately be the basis for additional charges, or they could be convening those grand juries in an event to indict other co-conspirators. What the government is more than likely going to do or has been doing is identifying potential co-conspirators, interviewing them, and getting them to flip on Mr. Combs to bolster their evidence. And so that's something that is likely taking place at this time. We won't have any information yet until there's an indictment or a superseding indictment, which we would expect will likely take place before trial.
Well, interesting you should say that. I've said this before with the other times we were doing these hearings. It's almost like the judge and the prosecutors and the defense are listening to this because what just happened in court? The judge says, when can you tell me about your ongoing investigation and any superseding indictment? The prosecutor, AUSA Johnson, says, I can't say much. We're mindful of the trial date. Any additional charges will have little discovery information. Little discovery? What does that mean? That means there's... I mean, if you're going to bring new charges, wouldn't that delay the trial?
Yeah, I think, or one thing that it could possibly mean is that the new information and potentially new indictments, a lot of the evidence that helps support that is evidence that's already been put forward. You know, because again, I think you have several people involved in Combs's team that helped facilitate a lot of these acts. That's what's being alleged, right? So I think if anything, what that means is the prosecution is mindful that, hey, if we're going to bring in additional charges, we'll make sure to do it in time so that the defense has a chance to respond and prepare their defense, obviously, but that a lot of the discovery that helps support that has already been disclosed and overlaps with a lot of the other charges. That's what I would imagine.
We got a question from Mandrin. Who else was in that hotel room? I'll answer that really quickly. There has been allegations that there was a sex worker in that hotel room back in 2016, which, again, if that's a key witness for the prosecution to establish that this was an instance of a freak-off, this was instance of sex trafficking, that Cassandra Ventura, assuming she is one of the cooperating witnesses, in this case, one of the witnesses, one of the victims in this case, that she was coerced into that. This is further evidence of that. Okay, we have an update from the court. So the judge asked the defense, defense, what do you think about this superseding indictment? Combs' lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, says the pattern of racketeering activities is very vague. They allege multiple acts of arson and kidnapping, but what events? We anticipate a motion for a bill of particulars coming to the court. Saf, I'll go to you. Do you think it is vague? And explain to everybody, what is a bill of particulars?
Okay. So a bill of particulars is essentially a pleading that we file with the court saying, Judge, we don't have enough information to properly defend ourselves against these allegations. We are now asking for the government to particularize with specificity what in other words, they are alleging against us and how they intend to prove it. What specific act constitutes as kidnapping? What specific act, time, date, and place constitutes the arson? And those are the underlying charges in the Racketeering Act. So what the defense is trying to do here is get a little bit more clear information so that they can adequately prepare their defense with respect to this.
And by the way, I believe the arson is with respect to the allegation of Kid Cudi, that Sean Combs had blew up Kid Cudi's car. That was something that was first echoed in Cassandra Ventura's complaint, her civil lawsuit that was filed back in November of 2023. Real quick follow-up on this. I mean, how much is the defense entitled to know about this case? Obviously, they're getting discovery, but don't they need a little bit more of an explanation from the prosecution what the exact charges are, who the witnesses are, what this case is going to look like? Because I think the argument would be, aren't they going to be blindsided? I mean, don't they have an opportunity to present a defense?
Well, one of the important things that has to happen is as we get discovery in our cases, we have to plan for everything. We have to prepare. And what I usually like to do is like to go witness by witness. Any name that is listed in that discovery, I'm generating a file for, I'm investigating that individual. We're looking at the specific allegations in the discovery and in the police paperwork or government paperwork that connects that particular witness to this particular act or activity on a particular, again, time, date, and place, and what information they essentially could be providing and what they will likely testify to at trial. So as defense attorneys, we have to sort of think about that and prepare for that as well. It's not always that the prosecutor is going to disclose that. So we have to be prepared for anything in those situations.
Another update from court. Combs' lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, says if what happened in Mr. Combs' bedroom was found to be entirely personal, we'd view that as subject to Brady, meaning exculpatory information. The judge said, should I deny without prejudice, meaning you can refile it, should I deny without prejudice the request made, understanding that the government will engage in a dialogue with you? So again, this is about the exchange of Brady material. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. You know, I understand the statement that his team is making in that certain information that might be evidence from his bedroom or certain private places would be prone to exculpatory evidence. The problem is that so much of the evidence surrounding this case is extremely personal and would depend on evidence from those types of places. So I think it's the defense team has a tougher time really trying to parse out what could be exculpatory, what's not relevant, what might be more private, because the allegations are premised on such personal acts.
Because he's not charged with sexual assault or battery just per se. Right. This is greater than this. This is a symptom of a sex trafficking operation, a racketeering operation. So there's things more here. I want to just go back to you, Elizabeth. I have an interesting question for you. This is from Joyce Tarsick. How did this even get to Diddy getting indicted? I clearly didn't pay attention. First of all, Joyce, thank you so much for watching. Shame on you, okay? You haven't been watching our live shows. You haven't been watching Sidebar. You haven't been watching Crime Fix. You haven't been watching any of our news packages. I'll allow you to briefly explain how Sean Combs was indicted.
Yeah, so I keep saying it, but I think so much credit has to go to Cassie Ventura, the lawsuit that she filed in November 2023. Up until that point, at least publicly, people really hadn't heard that much about Diddy in terms of, you know, these type of allegations. You know, there might have been court cases and things like that, obviously the shooting incident that happened in the 90s, but really what happened was in November 2023, Cassie Ventura filed her complaint against him, alleging, you know, that she was sex trafficked, that she was subject to assault and many other, you know, horrible acts. And then once that was filed, we saw a slew of many other lawsuits. Now I think probably in the hundreds of people alleging the same thing. So I think that was what probably led the federal government to start paying attention to this, to also realize that this wasn't just a one-time incident with a one-time victim, that it led to many, many other incidences. And what we saw was raids happening in the spring of Combs's various homes. And then in May 2024, just to break down the timeline, we saw that leak of that video of Cassandra Ventura being assaulted. Government was probably still trying to gather their evidence. Then September 2024, we saw he was indicted with sex trafficking, with racketeering and transportation to engage in prostitution.
Yep, and we have another update from court. This is about this motion regarding the Brady material. Mark Agnifilo, Sean Combs' defense attorney, says, "We prefer you to keep the motion open. We plan to expand it to asking for more specifics." Judge Subramanian says, "Based on what I've heard, there's going to be a dialogue," meaning a dialogue between the prosecution and the defense. "I'm willing to leave the motion open as long as you know I am not ignoring it." Okay, Safa, I want to go to you for another question we have. This is from Nicolette DeCong. And by the way, just to set the stage again, there is a live hearing happening right now in the Sean Combs criminal case in Manhattan. It's about discovery. It is about evidence. It is about a superseding indictment. It is about potentially turning over exculpatory information. We will see what else is discussed here. But this question for you, Safa, any update on his assistant and other staff that have direct access and knowledge to all of this? Are they subpoenaed by the grand jury as well?
There's a really good chance that those individuals have been subpoenaed by the grand jury or by the U.S. Attorney's Office for grand jury presentation. To my point earlier, those potential co-conspirators are those individuals, the assistants, anybody who may have booked a hotel, driven a car to transport someone somewhere, set up lighting in any hotel room. All of those individuals can be deemed co-conspirators. And so what is likely taking place, or what has likely taken place, is that the U.S. Attorney's Office has identified these individuals and said, okay, well, we're looking for your cooperation with this. We expect for you to testify in grand jury and to continue to cooperate with our investigation and prosecution, and we will forgo charging you with anything. So essentially, coming into an agreement so that, they can continue forward with their prosecution while these individuals avoid being prosecuted themselves.
Want a quick update from Joyce Tarsick, who I was joking around with, who said, "How did this all start?" I was just kidding, because she wrote, "Okay, I will do the walk of shame. I'm sorry I didn't follow, my bad." I was just kidding. First of all, I'm actually happy you asked that question, because sometimes it's good to do a 360-degree, analysis of where we're at. How did we get here? Appreciate the question. I was just kidding with you. Okay, we do have a question here, though, from Bree Smith. If Combs takes a plea, will that stop the trial from further investigation? So I'll ask you that, and also the likelihood that he would actually take a plea deal.
Yeah, so if he takes a plea, essentially, most of the time when that happens, the trial doesn't proceed forward. He pleads guilty, let's say, to all of the charges or some of them. I think if he were to take a plea, the prosecution would give a very hard time in not allowing him to plead to just one. They pressure him to plead to all. So that's typically what happens, is when a plea takes place, the trial doesn't go forward, obviously. The likelihood of that happening, I think, is very low. Yep. He's had chances to do that within the past few months. I think his attorneys are taking a very aggressive stance on this, which they're entitled to do. They're his defense attorneys. They have to put on a defense for him. I think the narratives that he stuck to in terms of his defense of these are consensual acts, these are consenting adults, these things didn't take place, I think we're going to see that continue to mount further. So I don't think it's likely.
Because he probably thinks he might have a good defense, and if he takes a plea, prison time is going to be on the table, and significant prison time on the table. You don't charge him like this. You don't hold a press conference talking about what he did for years and basically saying, they basically called him a monster and a predator. You don't do that unless you are going to move forward with significant prison time. I don't think you'd agree to it. He probably would say, let me take my chances. If I lose, at least I'm not forfeiting my chance to appeal it. And the time it takes to appeal it, is probably less time than the amount I would agree at a plea deal. So I want to go back. We have an update from court. The judge says, Mr. Agnifilo, any other discovery issues? Mr. Agnifilo, again, Sean Combs' lawyer, says no. The judge says, so on to schedule. By January 3rd, provide the court with any update on the motion schedule. The court's goal is to avoid any kind of surprise at the last minute. Let's meet March 17th. By the way, Safa, are you shocked this is going to potentially go to trial in May of 2025? Assuming there's not a superseding indictment, and assuming if it is a superseding indictment, it doesn't substantially change the case.
Absolutely. I'm not too surprised in the sense that this is a high-profile case. the position that Mr. Combs and his attorneys have taken is that they want to address this as quickly as possible. And Mr. Combs has a right to a speedy trial. So it is not surprising that it looks like we're on track to begin trial in March, or excuse me, not March, but May, and that, the adherence to that schedule is being taken serious by both sides. So not really a surprise there. I do expect that if there's a superseding indictment, the likelihood of the trial being delayed will be highly likely, even if there is not any additional discovery that's provided.
That's a good point. I agree. And I also let you know that court has officially adjourned. This was a quicker hearing. We're still going to break down. And also, if there are any pressers or anything that happens outside of that courtroom, we're going to hold it for you. We're going to hold it live. And also, we're waiting for Elizabeth Milner to come out. We want to see what her reaction is and what she observed of Sean Combs in that courtroom. Before I do that, we have more questions. This is a really interesting one. This is a question from Studio 310. What are the chances of ever finding out who the female celebrity is? Will we ever know? I think what this is in relation to is one of the lawsuits that was filed by a woman who claims that she was sexually abused by Sean Combs when she was 13 years old back in 2000 at the VMAs. And she has also sued Jay-Z, saying that he was celebrity A who abused her, but there was a celebrity B, an unnamed female celebrity B who was in that room, has not been named as a defendant. We don't know who that person is. This is a lawsuit that was brought by Tony Busby, a Texas attorney who has filed numerous lawsuits against Sean Combs. What do you think? We'll ever find out who that celebrity B is?
So I think that's all premised on how Jay-Z is planning on handling his defense. So far, he's also taken a very aggressive stance on it. He issued a very long statement about it. He denied it. He actually filed a lawsuit last month against the attorney that brought these claims, claiming extortion. So I think if he's going to continue to put on an aggressive defense, he's probably, and if he's maintaining his innocence, which so far he is, he's going to want to call on that female witness and say, hey, my take is that this didn't occur. You have to be a critical witness to help my case, and also corroborating that and saying that this didn't occur. So I think if he's going to continue to put on an aggressive defense, he's going to want to call her as a witness and say, I didn't witness this.
Well, here's the thing. Here's another way of looking at it, right? Why is she not named? Is she not named because she worked out a deal with Tony Busby, right? Did she already approach him and say, listen, I'm going to settle with you. I'll settle with your client. I don't want to be named in this lawsuit, but I feel like Tony Busby and this unnamed Jane Doe would call Celebrity B as a witness to what she observed, and I don't know if there's a way for her to get out of that, because she will be identified, right, if she testifies at a civil trial. How bad would she look if she was in that room while a 13-year-old girl was allegedly being abused? That's the part that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, no, that would be devastating, especially if the witness was an adult female who possibly could have done something, called someone, done something to stop it. So if she's identified, that would obviously be pretty negative to her, even if she didn't partake in these activities. Yeah. It's possible that he knew who she was and contacted her beforehand. With Jay-Z, we understood that before these allegations came forward that he had, sent him letters to Jay-Z's claim saying he was pressuring him to, come to some sort of settlement with this claim. So there was communications between Jay-Z's legal team and Tony Busby before this all came to light. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tony Busby has identified that witness or at least spoken to her a bit.
And by the way, with respect to Jay-Z, it came out over the weekend based on NBC reporting that there might be some holes in this accuser's story, which could be very problematic for her case, but actually could be a win for Jay-Z. Okay, we have another question from Greta Winter Carlson. Saf, I'll go to you. All charges against Diddy's alleged drug mule were dropped this week. This is referring to Brendan Paul. Is this an indication that he made a deal to be a witness against Diddy? Now, just to put a little bow on this, we're actually doing a sidebar on it. He agreed to a drug diversion program. One of the drug charges were actually dropped. The possession of cocaine was, ultimately, if he agreed to this kind of diversion program, which he did, it would be suspended. Talk to me about what that means. If he was given this kind of, preferential deal. Possession of cocaine and marijuana while he was allegedly on his way to jump on Sean Combs' plane. This was, I believe, 2 days after the raids on Combs' property. Do you think Brendan Paul, who has been named in one of the lawsuits as Sean Combs' alleged drug mule, do you think he worked out a deal to testify against him?
Well, cooperation agreements are typically kept in secret, but the likelihood that this individual cooperated in exchange for those charges to be dropped are highly likely. You don't see drug charges disappear into thin air, and it's not to say that they disappeared, but he's in now a drug diversion program. There has to be an incentive for the prosecutor to even give that type of offer. And so, in my opinion, professionally speaking, a good reasoning for that incentive is for his cooperation against Mr. Combs at a later date and time. Or he may have already provided certain information, met with the prosecutor's office to provide information in exchange for a reduced sentence on those drug charges. So very likely, although we may never know that information, or at least for the time being, we may not know because of the confidentiality of those things, but it is very likely, yes.
Another follow-up question for you, Safa. This is from Workout. You got to throw it in our faces. You make your title workout. I mean, that's fine. That's fine. Anyway, question is, what role will Jay-Z and the female celebrity, maybe Beyonce, have in Diddy's trial? I don't actually think it would be Beyonce. I think it's actually before. This is 2000. If anybody's a pop culture fan, I don't think they linked up yet. I don't believe that, right? They weren't linked up yet.
Yeah, I think they linked up. This is when my pop culture knowledge comes in handy. I think they linked up around 2002.
Yeah. Okay, so assuming it's not, but whatever, just Beyonce, Jay-Z, what role would they have in Sean Combs' criminal trial? I don't know if they would have a role, Safa.
I don't think so. I don't think Miss Jay-Z has anything to do with the allegations in Mr. Combs' criminal case and his criminal indictment. I don't think he has anything to do with that. I don't think that his wife or his family have anything to do with that. If not, then this would have been addressed sooner, and this would have been brought forth by the prosecutor's office. There's no incentive for Jay-Z to do any of those things because he has nothing to do with it. So I don't know that it would be even likely. And again, he's not charged with anything.
Yeah.
So although this allegation is being thrown around, the proof is in the pudding. He's being sued civilly. He's not being charged criminally.
Correct.
If that were the case, that would have been brought to light a while ago, and that's just not the case here.
And remember, the prosecutors have created kind of a timeline of when these alleged crimes happened. It wasn't from 2000. It was from 2008, 2009 to 2024. Not saying that evidence before that couldn't come in, but not every lawsuit and allegation that Sean Combs is facing, including the three now that were filed, last week by three men who say they were sexually abused by Sean Combs, would necessarily make their way into a criminal case. It was interesting. We have a question from Brushhog1. Wasn't Beyonce like 14 when Jay-Z started talking to her? I think it was 18 or 19, right? There was an age difference.
I think that she was of age when they started dating. From what I recall, being in the music industry, they had known each other, and she became famous very young before she was 18. I think what they both have said is that they didn't start dating until she was after 18, which is...
I think he was in his 30s, right?
Yeah, there's a pretty big age difference between them, which I think now we look at very differently as opposed to, 15, 20 years ago. But again, that doesn't really have much relation to the allegations that are being made against him.
Yeah, one more question for you. This is from Heather B. Silver Fox Club. Is it possible for Diddy to make a deal that would see other celebrities, cooperators, charged instead of him?
I think that would be very difficult. I personally have never heard of anything like that happening. I think, and Sava had touched on this before, I think what we will continue to see is certain individuals who might have partaken in criminal activity take some sort of plea so that they could be alleviated of criminal charges, but come forward with any helpful evidence. But in terms of any sort of trade-offs or having other celebrities charged instead of Diddy would be very strange, especially if Diddy actually did partake in those criminal activities as well.
So, by the way, we're waiting on Elizabeth Milner to come outside of the courthouse. She was our eyes and ears inside of that courtroom. Is going to tell. By the way, this is a live shot right now. You see Sean Combs' son exiting the courthouse. As you know, his children have accompanied him many times in this case, and we also know it was one of the points of controversy. They released a happy birthday video from Sean Combs from behind bars. I think it was last month or so, or maybe the month before that. So they have been very active. One of his sons has taken over his social media account, but they have been supporting him through this process. And so there you go, a live shot of outside that courthouse. We're waiting for Elizabeth Milner to come out. Okay, we have another question. Where is it? There we go. This will go to you, Safa. This is from JRN. Do you think other celebrities will be indicted?
It's certainly possible, but I think the likelihood is that Mr. Combs is going to be the sole celebrity indicted here in this case. Again, if there were questions about other celebrities that are partaking in this sort of activity, I expect that the government would have discovered that and filed charges by now. So it looks to me as if Mr. Combs is the target of this investigation and of this prosecution. Could other celebrities come into play later? Sure. For example, if there's a celebrity who the government wants them to cooperate as a witness and that person decides that they don't want to cooperate, well, the government has the power to do what we call a material witness order and essentially says, we're requiring you to come in and testify. And if not, we're going to arrest you. So that could be a way that maybe another celebrity would be charged in this. But at this point in time, I think Mr. Combs is the lone person here.
Before we hit a break, I want to go to you, Elizabeth, real quick. This is another question from Greta Winter Carlson. What is the status of Diddy's next appeal on his bail? When is that being heard? I think we both know he seemed to have abandoned that, particularly in an appellate court. So let me ask you, talk to us about what the status is. And if that's the case, why do you think he abandoned
Correct.
the bail?
So just to rewind a little bit, he's tried through his legal team 3 times to appeal his bail and essentially be released.
By the way, I think it might have been even a 4th time, but it was just for an emergency release. So yeah.
Correct. Yeah, it might have been several times, at the very least 3 times. Obviously, most recently, I think the last time I was on the show, the judge had later denied that a few days after I appeared. So we do know that he officially dropped his appeal with the Second Circuit to be released on bail. I think one of the reasons is that, you've seen denials happen multiple times. So his team has probably said, let's call it a loss. Obviously this is not happening. And then secondly, the trial is less than, I read, 200 days away.
Yeah,
May
right.
will be here before we know it. So I think now his legal team, especially at the start of the new year, is turning to, we have to prepare for trial. The fact that he might have to be behind bars while he's preparing for that, seems like that's the way it's going to be.
Expend your time, resources, and money the right way, because look, this case is getting pretty expensive. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get Elizabeth Milner up here. She's going to be our eyes and ears about what happened in that courtroom. Stay with us here on Law&Crime. We'll be right back. welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. So we are covering this live hearing that is happening downtown in federal court in Manhattan regarding Sean Diddy Combs. There was a hearing, short hearing between the prosecution, the defense, and the judge regarding evidence, regarding discovery in this case, and it seems it's progressing its way towards a May 5th, 2025 trial date, but I'm not going to talk about it myself. I want to bring on Elizabeth Milner, who is actually in that courthouse for us. Elizabeth, so good to see you. So two things for you. A, if you could briefly describe what the scene looked like, and more specifically, what did you observe of Sean Combs, who was in that courtroom? And B, what happened in court? What were the big takeaways?
Hey, Jesse. Great to see you as always. Today was a little bit different in that I got to the courthouse got inside the courthouse, I should say, about 15 minutes before 1 p.m. That shows you how early I was in there. And I was actually surprised to see less amount of journalists there kind of waiting for this hearing to get started. And so, comparing that to last hearing where it was just a ton of journalists just waiting to get inside that courtroom, this time was completely different in that it was probably about less than 20 journalists altogether. So when we were all kind of ushered up into the 15th floor this time, as opposed to the top floor like the last hearing, it was a lot smaller courtroom, but still the similar makeup of the courtroom. So you have one side where it's going to be Diddy's family members, it's going to be the general public, maybe some extra defense lawyers or those who work for the defense side, at least, kind of sitting over to the left side. And then on the right side where I was sitting, it's going to be all flooded with journalists, as well as some other members of the prosecution team who would kind of help with that case as well too. And so we all went up to the courtroom probably around 1:45 today. We're waiting to get this hearing started. It was interesting too because this time around, Diddy was brought in first. He was brought in about a couple minutes after 2 p.m. today, and we were all kind of waiting to see. We had heard mumblings that his mom might be in courtroom, that we were waiting for the children, but then nothing happened. But then, in another twist and turn, the children do walk in, but this time it was a lot smaller bunch than it was the last time. So last time you're having all of Diddy's children, except with the exception of Love, who is just a 2-year-old child, so she wasn't at court. But you had all of Diddy's children there except Love. But this time around, you just had Justin Combs and Christian Combs, meaning that there was no Quincy there today. Delilah and Jesse weren't there. Chance wasn't there, and the caretakers of his younger children who aren't of age just yet, they were not present inside the courtroom as well today. But his mom also wasn't in court today. So when Diddy came inside, it was still that standard issued MDC jumpsuit. He's wearing khaki. From that video of, I think that was obtained by Daily Mail back in September, of Diddy playing hacky sack in Central Park, to now he appeared just astonishingly thinner, which you can expect to be inside a federal detention center for a couple months now. A lot different from the luxury lifestyle that he was living before, but he appeared very noticeably thinner, and maybe being locked up in detention is starting to wear on him. He appeared grayer a little bit as well too, but again, he appeared just like how you would expect Diddy to appear for a hearing. He, when he came inside the courtroom, he hugged his attorneys. He especially hugged Anthony Rico. Then he had hugged Alexandra Shapiro as well too. But then he kept kind of looking at the gallery. Now again, this was at a point where Diddy's sons, Justin and Christian, weren't inside the courtroom just yet, but instead, whenever they came inside the courtroom, and again, this was after Diddy was already sitting down at the defense table, he looked back immediately, he smiled, he beamed up, he waved at at his two sons, and just kind of gave them like kind of a little bit of, it's a good to see you type of feeling. That's what I was gathering from inside that courtroom. Now, again, I want to remind our viewers that when we're inside federal court, again, there's no cameras, which, Jesse, I'm sure you have already mentioned that part. But, even for us journalists, with the exception of some who get a special permission of that, we just are relying on a notebook, a notepad, a pen, a pencil, in order to kind of take notes to see what is all going on. I can't even take my Apple Watch inside that courtroom whenever there's a hearing. I have to turn that in. I have to turn my laptop in. Of course, I have to turn my phone in. So we're kind of just eye-watching everything that's going on. Now, when Christian and Justin came inside that courtroom, they were actually sitting just right across from me over on the left side of the gallery. So what I was seeing from both of his sons was a little bit of leg shaking, what I perceived to be a little prayer right before the hearing had actually started as well too. But again, I think their focus was maintaining a good face for their father, being supportive of their father, which you expect at this point because they've attended pretty much all of the hearings so far, with the exception of that emergency hearing that happened, I believe, back in October now. But then they kind kind of just stood and it sat and just kind of listened to what was all kind of happening. Again, that court hearing was pretty quick. It was about 30 minutes long. I think all of us were kind of surprised that the hearing did last that short amount of time as opposed to last hearing, which was about 2 hours or so. But, as our viewers kind of want to get an inside glimpse of what you see at a federal courtroom, you're going to see the defense table and then you're going to see the prosecution table right in front. So it's not like how we see in normal trials where it's like right across from each other. It's like the defense, it is the prosecution, and then of course you're going to have the judge on the bench, and you're going to have the court sketch artist and the person who's kind of transcribing all of what is going on. But that is pretty much the inside glimpse of what I got from inside that courthouse.
And just let's, and appreciate that. That's a really vivid description of what it looks like, because unfortunately we don't have cameras in that courtroom, and there's no cameras expected in that courtroom as this trial progresses, even though there are a lot of people watching this and following it. So just to go back, what were briefly some of the main takeaways about what happened today? What was the discussion about, and where are we left? Where does this case go? What was being decided between the prosecution, the defense, and ultimately the judge?
Yeah, Jesse, it was a lot of just discovery material, which isn't the most fun topic to really talk about, if we're being honest here a little bit. So a lot of things was just turning over evidence, what time frame that evidence will be turned in. And so from what, so the government says that they're on track to produce the discovery by the end of the year, meaning December 31st. They say the investigation is still ongoing. They said that they pulled all the text messages from Combs as well as victim one in this case. And then they're kind of proceeding as quickly as possible when it comes to that superseding indictment. So the government was trying to make it clear that, they're still in the process of doing the investigation. It still seems like the superseding indictment is still lingering on in the case. But it was also interesting, too, because we have covered a number of stories about kind of the response from the defense side and kind of talking with the prosecution here. But I noticed whenever I was inside that courtroom that there was a lot of like chumminess going on. There was a lot of laughs, a little bit of giggles coming from Mark Agnifilo talking with the prosecutors right before the hearing had started. So they seemed, you wouldn't think that they're in this kind of, fiery battle or anything about the case. They seem pretty chummy. They seem very cordial. And they both sides seem to have respected each other in terms of turning over that evidence, making sure that every deadline is hit, and that type of sort. Now, there was a pending motion that the judge did bring up that, at the time, Judge Submaranian did mention that he wanted to keep, he was possibly thinking about denying that motion, but instead, what he did was the defense time, a lot of music kind of going on here in the background. But what the defense says is that their preference was to keep that motion open. So that way, the judge wouldn't dismiss it with a little bit of prejudice, which means that they could have refiled the motion. But, that didn't happen. The defense kind of appeared that they just wanted the motion to stay open, see what would happen with all of that. But, it seems like we will not be seeing any bit of Diddy until March when the next hearing is going. But it seems like they're all kind of going along with the timeline. It seems that they appear to be ready to get started on May 5th, pending whatever goes on with the potential superseding indictment, which again, I just want to stress to our viewers that has not been issued at this time. But it seems as though, they're on track for a May 5th trial date. But again, also, with this time frame given, that's 5 months, meaning 5 more months that Diddy is still behind bars until we kind of see how this entire trial plays out. But for the most part, that's what I gathered from this really quick hearing.
Listen, Elizabeth, that is incredibly helpful, and also it's great that somebody drove by with a great taste in music as well. That's a side note, but I will say now we kind of know where this is going. I'm still surprised this is headed towards a May trial date. We shall see what happens. Elizabeth Milner, thank you so much for going down to the courthouse, reporting back to us, and great reporting as always. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break. Again, I want to thank my guests, Elizabeth Vulai and Safa Robinson-Ferrer, for coming on. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. Great insight and breaking down our questions and also the questions from our viewers. Stay with us. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get 2 more people on to break down some more things that are happening in this case. Stay with us here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back.
Not that like the music distracts me, but it did. I was like, could you have gotten any louder?
It was Mario.
Mario? A Mario Kart?
They wanted to take the right feet up the court.
Oh, okay.
So this, I guess, just watch the camera. They want it right now.
Texting me. She's like, you're talking fast again. I'm like, oh, thanks. It's a good job, but, you know, talking fast again.
I think it could be like, I think it's like a fun guy.
Really? You have to do this for another hour?
And welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. So we right now have been covering this hearing that happened in federal court in Manhattan in the Sean Combs criminal case. And really, it was just more of a status hearing. It was about the discovery process. It was about evidence being turned over. Right now, it was a relatively short meeting. It looks like they're going to be meeting again in March. By January, they have determined that that is when they're going to have an update on any motions that need to be filed in this case. But by all accounts, all roads roads now lead to May 5th, 2025 for this trial. I will say there was a back and forth about Brady material, exculpatory material that needs to be turned over to the defense. There was a little bit discussion about victim one in this sex trafficking and racketeering case. We believe that to be Cassandra Ventura. And more importantly, I think the most interesting aspect is we still don't have a word from the government about when or if they will file a superseding indictment against Sean Combs that may include additional or amended charges. But I want to break this down a little bit more, and I'm going to be taking your questions right now on YouTube. So if you have questions about the hearing, if you have questions about the case, submit them right now. But I want to bring on criminal defense attorneys Mauricio Padilla and also Bradford Cohen. Thank you both so much for coming on. Mauricio, look, I'm not going to, it's a special day for you, big birthday, so I'm going to have you go first. Not really anything too significant, although I have to tell you, I thought it was interesting the judge asked the prosecutors, what's going on with the superseding indictment? What's going on with the investigation? And AUSA Johnson basically said, it's not so much I can reveal. We're still investigating. We're aware of the trial date. I can't imagine, and they said that if there is an indictment, a superseding indictment, that there really won't be that much more additional discovery. What does that tell you?
It tells me that if there is a superseding indictment, it's involving the same players that are already on the table. So that's what I think. So if they're saying that there's not going to be any new discovery, they're saying, yeah, we're going to have a superseding indictment and it's going to involve the people that you already know are involved. That's my takeaway from that.
Okay. By the way, we have a question from Carolyn Mansos. Is this going to be 3 trials for 3 different offenses or just one for everything? It's going to be one trial for the sex trafficking charge, the racketeering conspiracy charge, and also the transportation to engage in prostitution. So, Bradford, I want to go to you with something. Reaction to today's events at all, but also, I got to say, I'm still surprised this is going to May 5th, 2025. I'm surprised this hasn't been delayed. I thought by when they set that trial date to now, that would have changed. Are you surprised at all?
This type of case doesn't get better with time. It gets worse with time. So time, in my opinion, is to make it as quick as possible. If you make this a slower process, if you draw this out another 6 months, there's more victims that could come forward. There's more individuals who could testify. There's more people they could find to, say whatever. There's civil cases that could come up. So in my opinion, the defense is smart moving this along as quickly as possible. This superseding indictment that's going to come down that they keep talking about, it's unusual because they keep talking about it and they haven't done anything with it. So if it's going to be a superseding indictment, my opinion is they're just going to charge additional counts on the evidence they already have, on the accusations they already have. Maybe they're going to throw a RICO in there. I don't know. But it's not going to be something earth-shaking, earthquaking, that it's going to be something that has to push the date out further. Because, like I said, I think the defense is of the opinion that faster is better. And that is my opinion as well.
We have a question from Guy Terry. Has there been any non-related females coming to his defense? Look, I think in general, it's hard to say. I mean, one of the interesting things I will say, Mauricio, is there was an allegation put forward that, and I won't identify who this person is, but potentially a witness at this trial, was allegedly paid off or coerced by Sean Combs to put out a favorable statement when one of the lawsuits came out. And I think if everybody reads through the lines, they can determine who that person is. It's somebody who had been in a musical group with Sean Combs. And I thought that was interesting because she was one of the only people who actually came to his defense and said, one of his accusers is claiming, I didn't have that experience. I didn't see that. And it does make you wonder what his defense will be at a criminal trial, what kind of witnesses he will call. To suggest that this is not sex trafficking, to suggest this is not racketeering, to maybe strike at the credibility of key witnesses. If we believe victim one is Cassandra Ventura, who he will call to strike at her credibility. So what do you make of that, Mauricio?
Well, listen, I've always said it. The defense in this case has to be, my client is a freak, but my client is not a criminal, because these freak offs existed. They happened. So it's not much you can deny there. He's going to say, yeah, I was part of, I had these events. The people that were there, it was consensual. The problem with someone like him is that I can imagine that they were extremely sloppy with the payment of prostitutes, extremely sloppy with text messages, extremely sloppy with things that they were doing because he was already used to doing it for so long. I believe that the investigation went back to 2008 to the point that this was the norm for him. So I'm assuming that there's going to be a lot of text messages and forensic evidence that is going to pretty much show that they were going and hiring prostitutes and flying them across state lines. And these are things that I think back in 2008, 9, 10, people were doing. And people, before the whole Epstein thing, rich guys and billionaires, they would fill planes with prostitutes and go have orgies in other states. And all of a sudden, Diddy was doing it, allegedly up to 2024, which he should have had somebody in his corner telling him, hey, you know what? You're a billionaire. Maybe you shouldn't do this. But I don't think he did.
We got a question from Aussie Metal Mate. I'll throw this to you, Bradford. If Diddy is found guilty, will he be forced to sell his companies, or will he still be able to make money? And also I'll couple that with another question. This is from Nitty Gritty. Won't his money go to pay off restitution?
So there's a couple of things there. Number one is he has all these civil lawsuits, so who knows what's going on with the civil lawsuits and whether or not they're going to collect or if they're going to get a judgment. But if they get judgments, they can collect on any assets he has. Whether or not he gets convicted, that has no bearing on whether or not he can run a business. I mean, if he gets convicted, he'll be in jail. So for as much as you can run a business from jail or prison, he would be able to still conduct business as long as it's legal business. That has no bearing on it. And then you run into the kind of issue like who wants to do business with someone who's convicted of this type of crime. And just to touch on something that you said before about how many witnesses came forward in his defense, number one is you really don't want a lot of people coming forward in your defense because you want to be able to use those people at trial. And if they give statements before trial, the prosecution has something to go on to try and question you, to try and go at your veracity for truthfulness, things of that nature. So generally, you don't want a lot of people coming out before trial saying, hey, I support Sean Combs. That's number one. Number two is in this type of case, and you can see it in the past, anyone that comes out in support of someone that has these charges, those people are usually attacked. So it's very rare that you get a lot of people coming out in support when you have these type of charges against someone. And you could see that in the Ashton Kutcher situation, right? Where one of his friends who was on the show, that 70s show with him, was accused and then ultimately convicted of a crime. He wrote a letter saying, hey, I know this guy is a great guy. That's all that needed to be done. And then he kind of got canceled in Hollywood. Him and his wife, I think, moved out of Hollywood, moved back to Iowa or moved over to Europe. So I don't see a lot of people coming out in support of anyone that has this type of crime associated with them or accused of this type of crime.
That's a really good point. Really, really good point. Okay, we keep getting a recurring question. It's from True Crime Fan for Life, also Joyce Tarsick. Question is, how many years is he looking at if he's ultimately convicted? Now, before I throw this to you, Mauricio, about what he could actually be sentenced to, let me lay out the guidelines about what each charge is. So this is actually according to the Justice Department. He's charged with 1 count of racketeering conspiracy, which carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. 1 count of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion carries a maximum sentence of life in prison, mandatory minimum sentence, minimum 15 years in prison, and 1 count of transportation for purposes of prostitution carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. So Mauricio, if he's convicted across the board, what is he looking at?
I mean, listen, I don't think a judge is going to give him life, but a judge can put him away for life. He can give him, 25 years, which he could probably live, but I don't see him getting life. That's probably something that would be egregious. Everybody would look at the judge like, man, you kind of overdid it, but he's going to get a stack of years. He's going to get at least 20, in my opinion.
Yep, I think you're right. And by the way, I think even if he agreed to a plea deal, it would be significant prison time. Okay, I want to go to this question for you, Bradford. This is from Jay Say. Will the people who know about things and didn't report it in either New York City and Hollywood, will they be held publicly responsible in any way? We want satisfaction.
It's a funny question because it's like, will they be held responsible in any way? So in today's day and age, where you have the internet, everyone's going to be reporting on the case. Everyone's going to be knowledgeable about the individuals that were involved. There's going to be testimony as to those individuals. They're not going to be confidential source 1 or confidential source 2 or unindicted co-conspirator. They're going to actually have names, and people are going to associate them with this crime. I think that the court of public opinion might have something to say about it, but I believe that if some of these people are going to be charged, I would imagine they would be charged already, unless this superseding charge indictment has something to do with co-conspirators.
Yeah.
If they don't, then it would be the court of public opinion, because other than that, they should be charged now. It would be kind of stupid for the prosecutor to charge racketeering and not have co-defendants charged in the same case. So that's the only thing that's questionable about this case, is that it's there's some sort of racketeering charge, and then there's no one else charged and no one else mentioned in the indictment as to them charging them with formal charges.
It's a really good point. I'll do final thoughts here because we're going to wrap up, but I want to go to Mauricio on that. To respond, I mean, look at Ghislaine Maxwell, right? She was convicted of helping operate this sex trafficking empire, and yet she was the only one convicted as a part of it. Do you think that that is a problem for the prosecution, that it's just going to be Sean Combs allegedly leading this criminal enterprise that had associates and assistants and staff, and yet he's the only one charged? Is that going to hurt him? Is that going to hurt the prosecution?
I mean, I don't think they're going to stop. I don't think they're going to stop at him. I think that they're going to continue to investigate this case, and I think that they're going to look for other people and hold other people accountable besides him. I will be shocked if it just stays with Sean Combs.
Bradford, I'll give you the final word on final thoughts on this case as we progress. Sean Combs is going to be locked up during this Christmas holiday, New Year's, and potentially going to be locked up until his trial because he seemed to have abandoned any future efforts to make bail. So what are your final thoughts as we progress in this case?
So these cases are always difficult, right? And the thing is, what it comes down to is that the government is essentially making the accusations that it's more than just him hiring prostitutes, male and female, and having these freak-offs. They're associating it with violence. They're associating it with other things that make it worse. Because if you have these type of cases, your normal defense is, hey, this guy's a John. He's hiring prostitutes. We get it. He flies them in from California to Florida, but he's paying them for it. It's not something that is non-consensual. It's consensual. Not only is it consensual, they get $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. There was no complaint about that at the time. But now that he's charged with it, everyone's coming in and saying it was non-consensual and it was against their will, but they took the money willingly at the time. It's just a dangerous thing to argue because ultimately it's still illegal to hire a prostitute. And it's almost like you're appealing to a jury's sense of reason that this isn't what the government is putting forward. It's just a guy who, has these sexual proclivities that, is not the norm or not accepted in society. And it's a tough case. It really is a tough case. The thing that makes this more difficult is the violence that they're associating with it. That video of him, being abusive towards his girlfriend at the time, that's going to be kind of their crown jewel, to say, like, this is a bad guy, and then it would kind of take away the fact that a jury would feel bad that this is just some guy who hires hookers. This is a guy who gets violent with people, and that's what they're going to try and do.
Yeah, that video changed everything, both legally and our concept of what these allegations were. And by the way, the government is in possession of a lot more material that we just don't know what it is at this point. But listen, Bradford Cohen, Mauricio Padilla, thank you both so much for coming on. Mauricio, enjoy the rest of your birthday. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Great seeing you both.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for your questions. Best audience. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. We are going to continue to follow updates in the Sean Diddy Combs case. If there are more hearings, we'll make sure to do something like this, but we will continue to follow this case for you on all of the programs that we have here on Law and Crime. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber. We'll see you next time.